Alrighty, green light, go. Chapter 2. And we're being interrupted. That is Desiree. Hello, Desiree. Oh, my bad. Somebody's in a mood. Hello, Ms. DeVille. How can I help you, Ms. DeVille? Yes, it is true. I am a non-professional speaker. However, recall if you would, please recall. The guy that is etched onto every single one of those bazillion gold coins you own is the guy who gave the orders, the royal decree, that I be the one who narrates this project. So please, politely take it up with the throne. In case the listener is wondering, that was Desiree DeVille, the DeVille, who is the DeVille in DeGaulle and DeVille Publishers, the ones who are publishing this very project. So, once again, Chapter 2. In the world before D-Day, the world was pretty much unified as a single people. Well, at least there was one single government overseeing everything. And the world was expected to operate as a single organism, as a single entity. Though Lord Robert occasionally hinted at the fact there were severe problems with that back then, but that's a story for another tale. Now, there was in those days a massive transportation system that connected the top part of our world with the bottom part of our world. If you had looked at the thing from the top down, you would see that it was shaped like a gigantic capital I, and so it was called the I-Connect. The thing was massive. 5 lanes of traffic in both directions. In between the 2 sets of lanes, there was a massive tower that held elevated trains. The bottom layer of trains, some 20 feet above the roadway, was 3 trains wide on both sides. The next layer up was 2 trains wide, and the third layer up was 1 train wide. Now, on the very top of the tower, there was another train, but that was just for the super special high-end elite people, friends of the government, that type thing. Now, when D-Day come along, turns out not everybody died like was supposed to. And humorously enough, not everybody who did die was able to stay dead. But you wound up with 2 groups of people after society redeveloped, reformed, came back around again. One group of the living people turned out come to be living on the east side of the ruins of the massive I-Connect system. These people were the survivors. They endured the horrors of it all, and as a result of it all, they came to call themselves the Scarred. The other group that developed when society came back around were those people who actually sent D-Day into the world. They were the Light-Blessed, the very ones who destroyed everything. They developed their culture on the west side of the I-Connect ruins. They later came to be called the Elite due to their disposition. They are of a mind that they are better than you. And normally you don't have to ask them. They'll just let you know they are the elite. You don't deserve life. And that's their viewpoint. So, literally, the obscenely enormous pile of rubble that the Eye Connect became, thanks to D-Day, came to be a literal barrier between Eastern culture and Western culture. A literal wall, literally marking the boundary between East and West. And given that D-Day threw the world back into the Dark Ages, getting rid of all technology and things that were a result of technology, and meaning that everything happened on foot after D-Day, that tremendous pile of rubble was literally a barrier. You didn't just up and walk between East and West. Though there would come to be a few places where bridges were built over it. Well, of course, the war had destroyed them later on. Now, below the gigantic eye-shaped transportation system was the great southern plains of Anterra. Great because it was enormous. And the way the plains worked out was like this. The southern plains were literally incapable of not growing food. Something about that part of the world was just designed, specifically made for food production. Whatever kind of growable food you can imagine grew there. And as a result, whatever kind of edible animal you can imagine came to collect themselves in that area. The place was overrunning with all kinds of life-sustaining edible stuff. For centuries, there was non-stop, insane amounts of food production coming from that part of the world. The southern plains fueled the world's food supply for seemingly forever. A few of the very few surviving history books from before D-Day suggest that about 75% of the world's food came from the southern plains. Now, back to our story. For 200 years, hey Jason, which 200 years? The 200 years after D-Day. For 200 years, the elite and the scarred hated each other passionately. Now, not long before the advent of the dead, all of the hatred, dislike, skirmishing, and other forms of not getting along boiled over into all-out war. Now, originally, the scarred held the southern plains with no problem whatsoever. Meaning, the scarred did not have any trouble with eating. The rich ate, the middle folk ate, the bottom level poor folk ate. Everybody ate, and everybody was happy. No matter what the elite did, they simply could not take the plains from the scarred. The elite came to their breaking point, desperately needing the food production from the plains. Something happened. It looks like it was something big, but I was not able to ascertain exactly what. Somewhere along the lines, the names of the decision makers in the elite world changed. And when that happened, a decision was made. And that decision caused the elite 3rd Legion to be moved from the northern part of the world to the southern part of the world. And when the elite 3rd walked into the southern plains, history was changed utterly. The southern scarred soldiers had no answer whatsoever for the elite 3rd Legion. The elite 3rd wiped the scarred completely out of the South, leaving behind only tiny fragments of 3 separate scarred legions, the scarred 3rd, 4th, and 5th. For the sake of their own survival, they united and unofficially referred to themselves as the scarred 345th. So, not long before the advent of the dead, the elite took over complete control of the southern plains, and it came to be very close to impossible for ordinary scarred commoners to eat, and it came to be extremely difficult for the scarred military to eat. Hungry soldiers aren't the same thing as full-stomached soldiers. They cannot, no matter how hard they try, they cannot fight as well as a well-fed soldier. That's just a limitation their body imposes upon them without their conscious permission. As a result of that, militarily speaking, the scarred came to have very severe problems, and the elite came to be within inches of removing the scarred presence from off of the face of the planet. Total, complete victory was literally within their sights. Well, fate happened. One day, a dead farmer by the name of Randall Taliaferro walked outside the city, just like he always did. He wasn't doing anything other than looking for stuff. He was looking for new plants to grow, new sources of fertilizer. He was a farmer. He was looking for farmer-type stuff. On that fateful day, as Randall was looking for farmer-type stuff, he came to be captured by a group of elite soldiers. It's not that he wandered farther away from the city than he usually did. One thing about the dead is they enjoy their routine. They're not going to change it unless they're forced to. It's that the elite soldiers had wandered farther away from their base than they usually did. Now, there was in those days in the South an elite outpost simply called Outpost 11767. They took him there. Now, I could tell you what all transpired. I could tell you the details of his grotesque and quite severe injuries. But we'll just say they did really bad things to Randall. But understand, of course, the dead have a tremendous will. Had it been a living man that they did that stuff to, the living man, if he hadn't have died, would have gave up and died. And Randall surely, medically speaking, should have died at that base. But he did not give up. Now, it came to be a weekend. And apparently, that particular outpost had a weekend habit. They liked to collect their horses and have horse races, meaning they all got together and were betting on horse races. So, what that means is this. Every single individual assigned to that base came to be outside of the walls. Not one soul was left inside the walls of that outpost except for Randall. Randall found just enough willpower to be able to escape the room he was being kept in. And since nobody was inside the walls, he was able to make his way to the back gate. He was actually able to sneak past every one of those soldiers. And how he did that was rather amazing. When he got back to us, he was able to tell us what happened just before he re-died. So he was there. Obviously he was hiding. He wasn't jumping up and down saying, "Hey, here I am." And he was watching the horses go by, and he was watching everybody bet. And it dawned on him that literally every eye was on the races. The guards in the guard towers were not really concerned with what was going on inside. Every eye was on the horses. And it was that a pair of horses came by. And animals have abilities that people don't have. And apparently the horses sensed Randall's presence. Maybe they smelled him. Who knows? But the horses apparently realized that Randall wasn't normal. And it apparently messed with their minds. They were running full speed, and they tried their best to come to a stop instantly. That didn't work out well. There was a tremendous pileup, a tremendous mess. The riders were thrown, almost killed themselves. The horses were horribly injured. There was you might say, a fracas. All kinds of panic and all kinds of, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And Randall used that moment to walk away from his captors. Now, he told us just before he re-died that he had made his mind up. He's going to do everything possible to die like a man on his way home. He had just enough willpower to drag his horribly injured self back to the city gates. And it was there that several resurrected scouts saw him coming. It was Ellison Masters that was the first to see him, Ellison being a friend of mine, and turns out to be a relative of a certain very famous John Masters who comes into play into our story. Now, during this time, the Scarred had found themselves to be in absolute, total desperation. They were no longer in control of the southern plains, only had a very minute few soldiers present in the southern plains. Their ruler, who at the time was a man named John Connors, had come to be in an exceedingly difficult position. With taxation already hilariously bad, and with the military suffering horrific losses, and with starving being relatively common, it came to be that no one, absolutely no one, believed John Connors should be the ruler anymore. It was while Ruler Connors was dealing with this that some within the city discovered that Ruler Connors was keeping some guests in their city, which, by the way, was Anvil City. They were the guests that no one wanted to be kept around. While this business with Randall was going on, Ruler Connors had somehow come across a few of the dead, and he had held them captive in Anvil City. Now, something happened in that city, and we don't have time to give all the details, but it involved angry politicians. And as a result, one of those dead captives was able to sort of escape. But it wound up, he was thrown outside of the city into one of the trash piles. They were going to burn this man. And they did manage to burn him partially before he somehow managed to get away. So, how is it the Scarred had a few of our people captive in their city? Turns out their soldiers were also getting closer to our city than they had been previously. For 200 years at that point, the dead had been living in relative peace and safety. But time happened, and it came to be that both factions of the living were getting closer and closer to our home.